Hello, everybody. What time is it? That's right. It's Disability Horizons TV time. It's DHTV. I'm Mick Scarlett. I shall be leading the show a bit, I think. I haven't actually agreed this with Zec because we were busy waffling beforehand.
Go for it.
But we're talking care and stuff and things today. You can tell I haven't rehearsed this introduction at all. But anyway, I'm joined as usual by the wonderful Zec Richardson. So hello, Zec. How are you?
Good evening to everyone. I'm okay. I'm actually remarkably, probably as good as it gets at the moment, which has been rare. I don't think I've ever had that during the DHTV. It's always timed wrong.
It's a jinx, isn't it? Oh, good. It's Disability Horizon TV.
I've spoken too soon.
Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, we'll both collapse during the show. I must admit, I'm feeling remarkably good too. I've had a bit of a cruddy old time recently. Today I feel much better. I spend most of my time when I'm not doing actual work hitting my chair with hammers trying to get it to be comfortable. But
I was actually very uncomfortable with my chair yesterday during service. Couldn't figure out why. On the base of my spine, I just didn't feel right. And we figured out that when I fell out my wheelchair, my daughter didn't realise my torch was there and put the cushion on top of it.
Oh, I must admit, I once got out of bed in the middle of the night and thought, I think I've just broken my arse. And I got off the chair to go to the toilet and realised that I'd actually sat on my glasses and I'd actually shattered my glasses. And that feeling of grinding and crunching was the glasses under my arse. But luckily, I had not got a single cut on it. So, woo, lucky. Anyway, enough talk of my arse. Let's talk about our wonderful, wonderful guest. For today, we are joined by the one and only fantastic Anna Landre. Hello, Anna.
Hey, everyone.
Hello.
My name's Anna. I recently moved to London and have been hanging out with Mick here since September. Good to be here. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming on. Now, I must admit, when I met Anna, we met first on social media, and then we went out for drinking. Wonderful Camden. To try and show how bad Camden's access was, and
dying over the cobblestone. Yeah,
exactly. And I'm going to blow smoke up your ass a bit here and say basically we're talking about asses a lot tonight. I don't know why, but you sort of reinvigorated my sort of desire to keep going around equality because you were so passionate and so kind of, I don't know, just full of let's change the world. But it made me go a bit kind of woo. So thank you for that. But I'm not going to do any more introductions to you because I never do any research. So what I'm going to do is ask you to introduce yourself. Tell us all about yourself, Anna.
Well, first, I'm glad to hear that the whole overeager, happy American thing did it for you, because I think it's pretty annoying to some people. So, but yeah, I'm a master's student here at the London School of Economics, and I consider myself a scholar and an activist in terms of disability. And my activism really tends to run the gamut. You know, I've done everything from Medicaid reform in the U.S. to architectural access. I do a lot of mentorship of disabled children and young adults, worked on civil rights during COVID in the US. And I also, my favorite is always disability culture work, community building, being in spaces like these with other disabled people and exchanging ideas. But yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I must admit. Now, did you not say you did something with the Biden campaign? Because I know you were talking about that a little bit. So can you say anything about that, or is it all kind of top secret?
Yeah, no, I didn't work with the campaign directly. I certainly supported them from afar, but I was lucky to be invited this past summer to the White House for the ADA anniversary event and party. So that was a really nice kind of gathering and who's who of a lot of great activists in the US. You know, not everybody on the scene and doing the good work could be there because of COVID and a lot of reasons. But it was definitely an honor and just a really nice gathering.
And the White House has got to be very accessible, isn't it, with such an old president?
It was. I'm always skeptical, particularly when it comes to the U.S. government. But they had ramps everywhere there needed to be ramps. The lawn was pretty great. because they had for that event probably 20, 30 wheelchair users.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love the idea. You go to the White House to celebrate the ADA and go, but we can't get in. Of course, that would be the case if we went to go and celebrate the DDA at the Houses of Parliament, because we'd have to go through a side entrance. You can go through the main entrance, but then you have to go through a side entrance and up a little bit and round a corner. And if you go to the House of Lords, it's even more bizarre, which makes it strange because, of course, we have disabled people in the House of Lords. And, of course, yes, it's still not great. So we've got a way to go. But then I suppose we can claim that joyous thing of it's quite an old building.
I visited Parliament a few months ago. I'm here on a scholarship that's funded by the British government. So thank you to the British taxpayer. And yeah, they kept having to take me away from my group of students, all the other American scholars in this program. And they would lead me on all these weird little back ways. Pros and cons to that. I got to see some rooms that most people don't. And at the same time, it was like an absolute obstacle course.
I must admit, every time I go there, I kind of go, oh, you get to see. It's like that for most places, I think, especially, I don't know what it's like in America, but here, you get to see the backstage areas of just everywhere. And yeah, the Houses of Parliament, it's not as glamorous, or it's kind of always a bit like you're visiting an old hotel. Because it's sort of weird carpet and awful wallpaper and everything's just a bit grim. But there you go. Who knows what it will be like once they've spent all this money doing it up. We'll get to find out. We'll report back.
Well, are they listening to any disabled people in the renovations? I kind of doubt it.
I doubt it too, but we'll see.
I think it probably depends on whether there's one of us in the room or not, and that'll decide that.
They still won't listen.
That's the story of life. Which actually, ironically, brings me on to the next bit I was going to ask you about. It's obviously being from over there, over the other side of the pond.
Across the pond.
Across the pond. It's the other side from here. Obviously we're British, centre of the world.
Obviously.
So what I want to know is, what's it like? What's the differences? You've been there and you've been here. What's the differences between the UK and the US for disabled people?
Yeah, so I have to give a lot of caveats to this, especially as someone who is a comparative political scientist. It's really, really hard for me to generalize things. On the whole, though, I think as an American, I was really expecting for things to be better here than they are. I think we have this myth in the US that you guys over here are far more sophisticated and have your shit together, certainly way more than we do. And that's true on some counts. But, in terms of disability, I was expecting, particularly, I'll talk about three things. I'll talk about physical access. I'll kind of talk about social awareness, and then healthcare. But briefly, I think physical access I was really disappointed in, particularly in London. Supposed to be one of the greatest cities in the world, this cosmopolitan meeting of minds and culture and all of that. And I walk 15 minutes over to Soho and I can't get around because there's no ramps. So it's been a rude awakening.
Soho uses hoists.
Well, to be honest, I remember recording a show for the BBC about how inaccessible Soho was in about 1986. Yeah. So not only is it bad now, but it's always been bad. And everybody in Westminster, we're looking at you, Westminster Council, have known it's been bad. So yes, there is this, the change is glacial.
Yeah, super disappointing. I mean, even with the tube, and it's hard to compare US to UK. People ask me all the time, which is better. But, cities within the US are so different. New York is different than DC, is different than Birmingham, Alabama, is different than Seattle. But I expected better from London in terms of physical access. And there's so many easy things you could do, those little coffee shops with one step, but they don't have a ramp. Yeah. In terms of social awareness, though, yes. I have found you guys to be a lot more advanced. When I say disability rights here or disability justice, people have an inkling of what that is. Whereas in the US, people are like, what? What do you do? I don't understand.
Oh, that's funny.
There's just not the same level of even shallow awareness. And same with media representation. You guys are way ahead with even the small number of disabled people in entertainment.
Do you know what?
here.
It's funny that, because I just did a thing with the people that worked on Crip Camp, and we were discussing representation, and I was saying how funny it is because in England here we think you've got it sussed, because for generations you've had disabled people in dramas, especially, who don't. It's not a big deal, you know. CSI, ER, you know. I mean, this is like the 90s, you know. Had people that were disabled. No one went around blowing a big trumpet going, I'm now going to go and do a disability story. But they were there and they were visibly disabled. And they did talk about it occasionally, but it wasn't there to make a point, which kind of up until very recently was how we did disability. You know, we'd have a disabled story and it'd be, and now we're going to talk about the issues around disability. And then the program would go back to normal. Do you know what I mean? It's only been recently, like say with Liz Carr, that you've got a person in Silent Witness that doesn't, you know, and now I'm going to talk about disability and then I'm off. She's there. And I think that's, so it's weird because I think I talk about this a lot in my work in the media, that it's cyclic. And basically we work out of sync. So America kind of led the way in the 90s, but has tailed off a bit. And then we've gone up. So you're going, God, isn't it amazing there? And we're going, it's rubbish here. It's not as good as it used to be in America. And then you'll go, right, we've got to be beating England and the UK. So then you'll get good again. And then we'll tail off because that's how the media works. And
and I think it's got to be a case of like the grass is always greener, right? Like I'm going to rant about my godforsaken country, and then you're going to rant about your godforsaken country, and we all think we have it worse.
I think also, do you not think as well, is that, like, I suppose the thing is it's unfair to go, hey, the UK and US, because it's like going, that's like going like UK and all of Europe. Right. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's a big old country. I've been to places in America that were amazing, and I've been to places, I mean, New York, still not what you'd call accessible.
It's so bad.
And yet some of the European cities have really got it sussed.
Yeah. And yet if you go there, like you know, I was just saying, I go to Barcelona a lot, and you talk to people in Barcelona that are disabled, and they're like, "Oh my God, I wish I was in England." And you're like, "Why? You can get in everywhere and do everything." And they're like, "Yeah, I know, but they think of us as being poor little broken types here, and we can't work, and we don't get any social care, and you get." Like you can actually live your life the way you want to live it. And it's like, isn't it funny that I go to Barcelona to escape being disabled, and they go, if only we were like you out there in sunny England.
It's fascinating because there's so many dimensions that are relevant to disability. You have physical access, you have social, like treatment, healthcare, transportation. And, you know, as like a comparativist who's trained in political science in this, I love it. It's frustrating and it's messy, but I love it. And I wish we talked more about it. I think there's a lot of like intercultural exchange that,
and that's why that's why we wanted you on, you see, because we thought, well, you know, we can have your experience. Because healthcare is a big, because we're going to talk about care in a bit, like care, support care, but also healthcare is really important. And I think it's the one thing that we sort of kind of take for granted, that we would be lost if we were in the US system. Right. So what is it like? How do you say you're born disabled? What do you do if you're in the US?
Yeah, so it's really difficult. I mean, as I think everyone knows, the US has this hell of a private healthcare system that has gotten a bit better with some government access to healthcare recently, but it's similar to here in that the private healthcare companies, private insurance companies, if you're lucky enough to have one, you can be pretty set across a lot of dimensions of healthcare, but not personal assistance, not having a carer. That's not something that these private insurance companies like cover. To get that, you have to rely on what's called Medicaid, which is the US kind of state-run insurance for really, really poor people. And I say really, really poor because the poverty line is so low to the ground. And so in order to get disability care, you have to be poor. And this makes all disabled people poor because otherwise you can't get your care in the US. And I think you guys have some similar issues here with social care. Yeah. So I don't want to say that it's all better here and that you guys have it figured out, because definitely not. I think it's more that you're in a different room in hell, a little bit down the hall from my room in hell. But yeah, I'd say here it's been amazing to be able to access, you know, the non-care, non-home assistance aspects of healthcare so easily through the NHS. But I think you guys still have huge problems like we do with personal assistance, home care.
Do you not think that one of it is that we're run by a government that quite would like it to be like America? That there's so many of the people that are in control now of the way we're going, kind of look to America as the answer, and it's like for us, we're kind of going, no, anything but that. And I think that again, that's something I did not know, that you know, if you're born with parents who have
Right.
insurance, then kind of you're kind of okay. But but your care will never be provided, so you can never really get a job or work or ever earn any money. Because if you do, then you don't get the care, so then you can't go to work. So it becomes this vicious cycle.
It is. It's a poverty cycle. And it's something that I ran into I had to fight really hard to get the care I needed. I'm talking basic supports, like someone to help me get up in the morning, shower, get dressed, that kind of thing. I had to fight really hard to get Medicaid to give that to me because they are so stingy on the hours they give people. No one ever has enough hours. And for that reason, a lot of disabled people in America can never move out from living with their parents because they need their parents to keep providing that extra care. And then once I fought that, against all odds, I was able to get this base level that I needed. I went to college, got a summer internship that was paying me, and Medicaid was going to completely cut me off because suddenly I was making money. I was making minimum wage for 3 months out of the year at a summer internship. And that was enough for them to say, well, obviously you're not disabled and you don't need any of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite sad because we used to have what was called the Independent Living Fund, which was this really fantastic way of saying to a disabled person, right, you need care, here is some money, spend it how you like.
Yeah.
But they did, the government did away with that God knows how long ago. And I saw my friends who have that level of support and required that level of support, their lives changed.
Yeah, they spent ages getting people out and being independent. It was all this money. You can do it, and getting them there in places. And then it was like, hang
on a minute, there's money. The main thing was, Zec, I'll tell you what happened was that we were being paid money and we spent it as we wished. So lots of people employed their own personal support workers directly, right? But then there's no money in that for big business.
Right.
So if you take that away and make it so you've got to employ it from some special care sort of company, and then they tell you what you get, and then your money goes to them rather than to you to pay to them and all this. So you end up with this kind of, it's just another privatization of what we get. That means that people are having their care packages cut and then cut again and then cut again in the name of saving money. And, people are being told, well, wear incontinence pads at night so that you don't need to be taken to the toilet, but I'm not incontinent. Well, it doesn't matter because we can't cover your nighttime care. And it's like, well, and so to any of our viewers, if you have a care story, please send it in and we will put it up underneath and talk about that. Because otherwise we just talk about ourselves as usual. And
we've got Katie Fraser, who's no, that's the wrong one. No, it's not Katie Fraser. See, I'm getting all
that's Rosa Davids. Yeah, see,
we've got Georgia Vine, who is commented, and Georgia is an occupational therapist, and Georgia is cerebral palsy, isn't she? And she's there out working in the. Taking care of us is absolutely amazing. So we are lucky to have people working in the industry.
See, one of the things as well is that people forget that, like, loads of my mates that used to be on the Independent Living Fund all worked. They worked full time, and like you said, they were helped to get up. They were helped to do all this stuff that they needed, that just day-to-day stuff that meant they could go to work. And we also have access to work, which is a way of paying us for support that we might need while at work. But the thing is, both of those things actually earned more money than they cost.
Right.
Because it meant you weren't in full-time care, so you didn't cost all that money. And then when you went to work, for every pound of access to work, I think it makes back £1.62. So it actually earns the government 62p for every pound they pay. So it's actually an income stream for the government. But because it looks like money going out, because they're not connected, the tax and the DWP, then what happens is, we can cut that a bit. We can cut that a bit. And loads of people I know that get access to work are finding that gets cut away too. So, it's because we're trying to be American, I feel. And it's basically, if you've got the money, if you earn enough money to pay someone to support you, great. If you don't, then tough. and that's
Yeah.
the way it's going now.
In the US, we call it the institutional bias, that paradox that, you know, in the US, it's because the nursing home lobby is so strong.
If you've got the money, if you
And
have enough money to pay someone to support
oh,
Ooh.
So ignore me. I'm trying to look up a comment that Katie's made on the main feed, and I just clicked on us live. So carry on as you were.
oh, good.
There you go, folks. You have an idea of how much delay there is on what we're doing.
Yeah, and so anyway, in the US, we call it the institutional bias, which is that the system is going to work so hard to put you into a nursing home before it is going to give you the same amount of care or less meaning cheaper care at home, because this nursing home lobby is so strong, and the politicians are in kind of that pocket. They don't want to give you access to care at home. And it's absolutely criminal, given that economically and quality of life wise for disabled people, it is so much better to receive
morally,
care at home.
The truth is, it's morally better to have people out. What's great, because when we all used to be in institutions, I remember doing a documentary on the way that disabled people were institutionalized during the Victorian period, and how they then got left there, and how Victorian institutions carried on up until very, very recently. And there was a huge push.
There still are institutions.
But the thing is, I mean, I remember when I became paralyzed, like I was always disabled, but I walked with a limp. And then at 15, I became paralyzed. And there was talk of putting me in an institution. And all I had become was a wheelchair user. Do you know what I mean? I was just basically the same as someone that came off a motorbike. But because I was 15, and there was a discussion about how stressful it would be for my mum to look after me, that this was something they discussed. And it was like, but God's sake, that's 1981. Do you mean the fact that a 15-year-old could be put in a home, an institution, because he needed to be looked after in 1981 is horrific. But yet that's what it was like. And that is what you call a segue, folks, because now we're going to bring it on to the care dilemma. Look at this. You would believe I used to work in television, you know.
It's a professional. Anyway. He's worth every penny.
He is. I'm worth every penny of the 0 pennies I get. Yep. But anyway, I do this for love, folks. We do this for love of you, and also because we love talking to a lot. Anyway, we are now going to talk about this idea, this care dilemma. And I think that, you know, whether you call someone a carer, a support worker, or a personal assistant, whatever, lots of us have this thing that comes into our lives. When you become disabled or are disabled, you need some level of support. We're covering it today because both Zec and myself are very fortunate. Most of our care comes from our partners, our wives.
And we've mirrored each other recently.
We have. We do this a lot, don't we? We find out that we've actually shared this. We're obviously psychically linked. But we've both had an experience, haven't we, Zec, where our wives have been unable to support us as usual. I mean, what happened in your situation? Obviously, don't tell us too much, but, you know.
Well, basically, Mrs. Zec had to go into hospital for a procedure. She had a polyp in her uterus, and so she was sent in for day stay. They ran out of time, so Mrs. Richardson was in overnight.
Yeah, and
now she's laid up. It's been she's in a lot of comfort. A lot of cramping pain. So she thinks she can lay on the settee and ignore me. And I've thrown pillows at her, and I've tried all sorts. And she just no. So she's not able to do things that she normally would. And I haven't got very high care needs.
No.
She may disagree. She may say I take a lot of care. But so it's not only from I was quite settled. It's like, okay, but she was worrying about me rather than herself when she went in.
Yeah.
My mum said, "Shall I come and stay with you?" And I was like, "Hell no." And so all these people worrying. Luckily, I have got people around that if they're saying text if you fall over, which does happen. I get in my wheelchair and I end up out the back quite a lot. And so, it was kind of a bit up in the air where she's laid up. She's milking it.
Well, I must admit, I mean, I'm similar. My wife had to go into hospital for something and then came out. But to be honest, she's had a bit of a stressful time recently because I was so ill. Basically what she's doing is she's gone and stayed with friends for a bit on and off just because she can get away from me, because I got to admit I'm quite a bloke when it comes to being cared for. I've had it all my life, but it still frustrates the hell out of me. And so
are you grumpy like me, Mik? Are you grumpy?
And especially when things hurt, I found myself, and she kind of said, I can't be in the same room as you all the time. You're such a miserable shit. But she's got to stay with friends, and then she comes home, and then she comes back. So basically, rather than be here all the while, she's kind of come in and go, what do you need doing? And it's shocking how much you realise that your life is set up around having someone there all the time, and then suddenly they're not. And you're like, oh, wow. And that's why I wanted to talk about it, because you know, you're so used to it just going over and just that's the way it's done. And then suddenly it isn't done like that. So, yeah, I mean, I'm like you, Zec, I don't have a huge amount I need doing. If anything, most of the things I need doing are because we've been together 26 years. Life has been set up so that everything is at Diane height reach. It's not at my height reach. So I've got loads of stuff I can't do in the house.
No, I've got more reach than Donna. I can actually reach higher than little 4 foot.
Tell you one of the things I mean, I have to have my chair put in the car. I have to have help sometimes with getting my trousers on and off because I fall over and I'm especially coming off, especially after a long day. I'm like, pull these off, will you? And
help with showering.
I don't need help, but what I do need is I need someone to be there in case I swan dive out of the bloody thing or fall over.
And yet, Mrs. Richardson once, I transferred from my wheelchair to the bath board and she thought it'd be funny to smack me on the bum. I panicked. I missed the board. It flipped. I ended up in the board on the fin of the bath board, right in my crack, and she stood there just laughing.
The joy of being cared for. So, but it's funny because Zec, you came to it late in life, didn't you? You were, you know, Mr. Action, you know, fire person doing all things, and then suddenly became disabled.
14 years, yeah.
Yeah, but so you had that transition, which is, I think, because I'm probably more like Anna in that I've always had some level. My mum used to put my clothes on for me way past, you know, what it would be normal for a kid. My
mum used to put my clothes on for me at one stage as well.
Yeah, but you know, there's a point at which it becomes. This is the thing, right? Is that you're cared for, aren't you? Like L kids are, and then at some point, the disabled kids kind of carry on being.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and then everybody else, you know, doesn't. You know, the things.
It's very hard to accept care when you haven't had it before because. It's that whole battle. I think we all do it, where you don't want to be more disabled than you are. So at first, crutches, I'm not using a wheelchair because that'll make me look more disabled. And I'm not doing this because it'll make me feel in myself psychologically more disabled. And I could do it for myself. Get off, I could do it for myself. And eventually you realise, no, you can't.
It's also, I think, a really difficult thing in terms of trust. Because you two, in your situation, your wives are helping you. This is someone you choose to be around in some capacity.
That was what I was going to ask you next, is what's it like to be you? Because you employ people to do what like we both have care provided by someone who will also see you naked for fun reasons, so to speak. So what is it like? Because I think one of the things we don't do as disabled people is talk to each other and ask us questions of each other and be, you know, we're kind of a bit like, oh yeah, all civil rights, man, and not kind of go, so what's it like? On our last show, didn't we? We were talking about how do visually impaired people pick up poo. And it was sort of one of the, everyone asked us that, and it's like, well, actually, it's, you know, pick up dog poo. You've got a guy there. How do you do it? And it's one of those questions. Like I was like, so how do you do it? Because I didn't want to be cool. So, because what is it like? Because did you have to have that
to be that vulnerable? Yeah.
Yes, but did you have to have that level of care all your life? Did you what's it like? Tell us what it's like. Anna.
I will tell you if you shut up, mate.
I will. See, thank you. That's how you deal with me, Zec. That's how you get me to shut up.
Yeah, I had that transition too. A similar transition in that, you know, like you guys said, you grow up and you're a kid and your parents are just taking care of you, and that's normal because you're a kid, and all kids get that care. And then what happened to me is that when I was in kind of middle school, and that means about like 13 years old, I had a really bad medical episode where I was in the hospital for a while, really sick with pneumonia. And on the way out, the social worker finally helped my mom set up care through Medicaid for me. So I suddenly had access to carers or personal assistants who were not my mom. And that was really scary for me because suddenly strangers were coming into my house and it would be like, hi, hello, my name is Anna. 15 minutes later, you're helping me shower.
What age was that?
That was at kind of like 13, 14.
Oh, teenage years as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's a whole other level to it. And I was really reluctant. I was nervous about that. And I'm really glad that my mom kind of pushed me into it, both for her mental health, because, you know, she was overworked, working as a single mom with 3 kids, 1 kid who had serious disability needs. And so she needed this as much as I needed it in order to be successful in the future. Because it's one of those things where you got to learn to do it at some point. Otherwise, what was I going to live with my mom taking care of me the whole rest of my life? Like now I'm 23 and living on a different continent from her. And that transition has made everything possible after that for me to go away to college by myself and manage my personal assistants and kind of have that, even though it's hard, even though it's what in disability studies we call forced intimacy. You know, you don't want to be vulnerable in that way to random strangers. I don't want to wake up at 8 a.m. every morning to some random person who has to be there so I can get out of bed. I don't want to have to look at them and be like, good morning, how are you?
So how does a carer fit in? How does a carer fit in when you form a relationship with someone, an intimate relationship, and you've got a carer? Because
I'm so glad you asked that, Zec, because I really wanted to, and I didn't know if I should.
Yeah. No, I mean, are you talking about like when you're dating somebody, or just
I mean, if you get to the point where, you know, somebody's staying over the night, but then you've got carers.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to differ for every person because, you know, I can then, if I have someone else to help me who's staying the night, so clearly I'm comfortable with them, then I'm just going to tell the carer, okay, you're off tonight. Like I'm still going to pay you, but you're off. And I think there have been other disabled people who can't do that, who maybe need more skilled care. So they still need their carer there when their girlfriend, boyfriend, partner is around. And that's a whole other level of complexity that, you know, even I can't imagine. And it's a tough thing to navigate.
I think it's really important.
People don't think about.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's also a conversation we don't have.
Right.
Because, like, I mean, you have it in your academic studies, but it's like we don't talk to each other about it very much at all. And when you do, you're almost like, you shouldn't really be talking about that, you know, because that's not very social model empowerment, disability rightsy. But actually, if we don't talk about it, we can't support each other. We can't be allies to each other if we don't actually share our experiences. Because it's like, I mean, I kind of think that also Zec and me especially place far too much responsibility on people who love us, so that therefore it becomes a strain on them, and it would be, you know, but we don't know how to start, because we, like you said, you know, we haven't ever had that situation where someone said, this is how you hire someone to help you. And also how would you hire someone to put your chair in your car or get petrol? Don't know about you, Zec, but do you have this thing where you drive to a petrol station and your wife gets out, and then everybody else looks at you like, you must be an abusive partner because you're making that little girl put petrol in while you, great big boat, sit there. They can't see the chair because it's in the boot. So you can feel the daggers.
Or we went to the tip. We had all the rubbish in the back of the car, and Donna's getting out and lugging all this stuff and throwing it away, and I'm sat there listening to the radio, and people are going,
muscly bloke in the car, and they're like, what a bastard. And I'm going, you keep putting your blue badge out and going, you know, and it's just bizarre.
I keep going back to the IT crowd. Leg disabled. I'm leg disabled. Classic sketch.
It's actually a perfect example of the social model. If they just made, you know, tips and recycling centres more accessible, we could do it for ourselves. I mean, that's right. That's the social model. It's all oppression and not.
I don't drive anymore. You know, when I did drive, when I first started using the wheelchair, I mean, I pulled up at the pump, got out, and I'm like, I managed to drag myself through the back of the car, get my chair out, got in, and I'm like, oh shit, I should have parked further away. Backing through the back of the car.
Do you know what? It's all right when it's on the passenger side, but when the pump's on, when the petrol goes in on the driver's side, you're like, oh, so I've got to park and either park far enough away to get the chair out.
Yeah,
this is a whole other show, to be honest.
It is, yeah.
Because we've only got a little while left, and we're talking far too much about getting petrol. But it's weird. It's the little things, and it's all. I've always believed that idea, that interesting question around, like, relationships is one we don't talk about enough.
And it's such a shame because, you know, we spend years learning how to do this, and when we could kind of get guides from the people who have done it, who have that institutional knowledge and have figured it out. And I think there's a lot to be gained from just talking to people who have done it, and us creating resources like this
Yep.
kind of, hour where we're talking through some of this and how we handle it, that we just need so much more, because the system, whether you're in the UK or the US, makes it unbelievably hard to get carers, to figure out how to keep them, both in terms of your government benefits and making sure they as employees are happy, how to manage them and do all of this. The system makes it so hard where it should be easy. The least we can do is talk to each other.
Yeah. I entirely agree. And that's kind of what Disability Horizons TV was set up for, was kind of trying to get people to talk about stuff that we wouldn't normally talk about. But are there any positives, do you think, to requiring care? I'm sorry. Yes, folks, I've got to just admit that I bought myself a standing table for my computer. And
Mik,
everyone's like, why have you got a standing table? And it's because I can raise and lower the keyboard because it stops my back hurting. But it does mean I can actually raise it right up to standing height and type like that. So it's fantastic.
He's got high hopes.
I've just bashed it, so that's why the camera wobbled.
I'm gonna say, I hate to break this to you, Mik. You can't stand.
It's basically, I'm just trying to torture myself. I'm trying to prove the social model exists even in my own studio. But what are there good things about being careful? Because people always think about it as, it must be awful. I think it's one of the things that when you become disabled, that's most difficult to cope with. But I wonder, would you say there are any positives that it's brought to your life? We're all silent now. Everyone's thinking.
No.
Well, I think Anna might have frozen.
Oh, I thought she was thinking.
I thought she was thinking too.
Oh no, am I back?
Oh, there you go, you're back. Ooh, that was so funny because you just sort of went.
We thought you were thinking.
You looked like you were deep in thought, as if to go, well, no, not really, I can't think. Hang on a minute. But yeah, you were actually talking. So are there any positives?
I think the biggest thing I can stress is that it's not positive or negative. It's just so mundane. To me, having grown up disabled, like I was born disabled. I was diagnosed when I was 1.5. And so care, whether from a family member or from a stranger, an employee, is just part of life. And I think people who don't deal with it think, oh, that must be so terrible. You must be miserable all the time. No, it's part of my day, the same as things are part of your day. Doesn't mean it's not difficult sometimes, but I think it's just something you learn to live with that becomes part of the routine. And I think in terms of some positives, you develop a lot of really interesting skills. I do scheduling, I do payroll. I'm like a one-person HR department. You develop some really great people management skills because you're working with people who are very different from you, carers come from all different backgrounds. They might be a student, this might be their career. A lot of people in the UK and the US who are carers are immigrants. So you're definitely developing people skills and meeting people from different backgrounds, which I really do enjoy. And there's also a whole lot of negatives that we can talk about, but I think
so. What are they?
Skills,
yeah, because I think that I don't know about you, Zec, but for me, I suppose because we are cared by people we're intimate with, it's kind of it's quite nice because it's that. I'm lucky. I was brought up in a household where my dad was useless, so my mum did everything. Everything. And I remember dating a girl when I was about 19, and her parents hated me. And when we finally sort of sat them down and said, why are you so horrible to me? And they said, well, because he won't be able to do the gardening, he will never be able to decorate, and he won't be able to go up in the loft. And I was like,
loft.
Fine. Yes.
Yeah.
So I was like, what? As these were the things apparently that were bad about me. And ironically, since then, I've always decorated my own home. I've always done my own gardening, and I've never lived anywhere with a loft. But it's that sort of thing of people think you're going to need to have everything done for you, and so they judge you as being kind of a dry. But you actually bring sort of something wonderful to a relationship because so many people are freaked out by needing help, and you kind of. You do have to say, can you do this for me? Could I do that for you? And also, I think people don't realize that you actually do stuff for them too.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
think this is a fascinating, like, ever since I heard you guys start talking about, how your wives help you with care, I think it's really important to talk about like the gendered
Mm.
aspects of
Yep.
care. Whether
Mm.
you're a
Mm.
disabled or non-disabled woman, I think there's so much more in terms of the expectations that you're going to care for someone, whether you're disabled or not. And I think it's interesting to think about that dynamic with spouses who are one disabled person, one non, or two
Mm.
disabled people.
Yep.
I have these two friends who, one of them, he's a wheelchair user, and his wife, who's also my friend, she has BPD. So they're both
Mm.
disabled, but only
Yep.
his disability is visible.
Yeah.
So people will kind of go up to them and say, "Oh, it's so nice that you take care of him.
Yes.
Oh,
Yep.
that's so cute, so sweet." And they're saying that to her both because she's a woman expected to do the caring and because he's the visibly disabled one.
Yep.
But she talks a lot about how, her disability, BPD, requires a whole lot of care too.
Oh, yes.
And he's
Yep.
supporting her in a million different ways.
Mm.
And in fact, she said, and I don't know if this is true, I think there's a lot of different perspectives on this. She feels like he takes more care of her because he has his own PAs who he employs to come in the house and care for him. So she's not doing that kind of extra care. And it's just, I think there's a lot of intersections on gender, on type of disability. Yeah.
It's funny because when I was younger, I had a lot of female disabled friends who said there was this kind of, when you're male disabled, especially if you're a wheelchair user, I think, but it's kind of okay. But women are like, well, I don't mind being in a relationship with you because that's kind of my job. I'm almost a nurse. I never want to be like, oh, aren't you brave and lovely? And yet blokes would go, oh no, it's too much. I won't do that. And my friend said it's much harder to find someone, but yet almost all of them now are in relationships with really lovely blokes who kind of, like you said, there's this balance that they do stuff for the disabled person that possibly people think of, but then you bring extra stuff to the relationship that partner needed. And a lot of men don't actually know they need that kind of emotional support, and it brings out something in a male or in a kind of person that's hung up on trying to be, butch, that actually makes them better people. And I know that lots of my disabled female friends have said that. Said, I met someone that was lovely, and they've become lovelier, shall we say? So,
Let's face it, all husbands need carers anyway.
Well, that's it. Like I said, my dad was so useless that, to be honest, I'm so much easier to be with than my dad. I mean, he never cooked, he never cleaned, he never decorated, he's never done the garden. He never went in the loft. I didn't even know that men were meant to do those things, to be honest. I always thought the women did them because that's how I was brought up. Mum did everything. And so we did, every time we did something, it was like, look at us, aren't we amazing? We're doing something. It's like, no, you're just being like, luckily growing up in the 80s meant that men were forced to do more because that was part of the new man movement, you see. It's not about Gary Newman. That's something else. Anyway, let's see. We've only got a few little bits left, and I am going to try and stop talking. So yeah, let's think about what tips would you give to someone who's either younger and doing that transition like you went through, Anna, or someone who's new to being cared for because they've just become disabled or their impairment has changed. What tips have you got?
Yeah, I mean, my first one is to don't try and go it alone. Make connections in the disability community, talk to other disabled people, because we spend years developing this institutional knowledge. And I just really think we would save so much time and pain and suffering if we just talk to each other. And I know I'm always thrilled when someone comes to me in the US, like wanting help with the Medicaid system, thrilled to hop on the phone with them. And it's hard. It's something that is an additional burden on me, but it's something that I just believe so strongly in. So I find someone with that institutional knowledge. I also think it's really important to set boundaries, and there's a lot of different ways you can go with this. If you're in a romantic relationship with someone, make sure you're thinking about them and setting boundaries on how much they're helping you, how much they feel they can help you, how much you're comfortable with, so that you both don't get burned out and then hate each other. Because this happens all the time. This happens with romantic partners. This happens between parents and disabled kids. This happens even between, if you're helping your friend, boundaries are just so important with those care relationships. And also, when you're employing carers, you might think, oh, well, since they're your employee and you're their boss, everything's all professional and nice and goes smoothly. Absolutely not. I think I find a lot that because maybe they feel like they're helping me with something that's so intimate and personal, that then they start sharing their intimate and personal details with me. And I hear about, you know, their boyfriend and the troubles they're having with their family, and I just don't want to. I want to take a shower, not hear about you ranting about how your boyfriend's fucking annoying.
I don't want to be Auntie Anna while you're helping me shower.
Exactly. Like I'm not your therapist. Like this.
At least wait till we're having a cup of coffee together afterwards.
Can I get dressed first?
Yes, please.
Pretty please. And I like, you know, like you're getting paid here to perform a service. I'm not getting paid here to be your therapist. And I think it's really important to address those things and other aspects of like what they're there to do for you before things get ugly and tough, and it can avoid a lot of issues in the future. Even though it's hard to be someone's boss and be an employer in, you know, an aspect of life that isn't your actual job. It's just like a weird personal life thing that you also have to do when you're disabled.
It's funny, I do a lot of work with HR departments trying to get them to understand why employing disabled people is a great idea. And I say that that's one of the things I focus on a lot is all of our extra skills. We may not have a fantastic CV, but actually that's because most of us have missed out the fact that we've got all these other things that are part of our day-to-day life that most non-disabled people will never come near unless they're at work. So actually, just because someone doesn't have a packed CV, find out about their personal life, because they're going to be bringing these, like you said, organizational skills and management skills and all that stuff. But many of our community just have to have all the while, you know, the whole forward planning. One of the things everyone says about being disabled is forward planning. Well, you know, we are so good at that. We don't even think of that as a skill. It's a soft skill, but it's a skill that many non-disabled people do not have.
Right.
We can't be spontaneous. You know, you can't just go, right, I'm off to London.
So Zec, what tips have you got? Oh, sorry, because I know that I don't. Could just carry on, but I'm thinking we're already 2 minutes over, and I kind of, like, it's all right. We don't actually have any dancing scores to catch up on at the minute.
I'm not running away to watch Strictly Come Dancing. Yes, I'm a tart, I know. For me, I think from the point of view where, you know, we were both able-bodied and then I became disabled, even though it was quite slowly with a sudden push at the end. You've got to be careful to try and keep that romantic, that thing you had before you became disabled, and not just be that now you've got a carer who sleeps with you. You've got to try and make sure their needs are cared for, because it's all very well to, when you're unwell, if you're in pain or you've got a very bad health condition, for it all to become just about you. But it's not. Particularly, we've got to really look after our partners, because I've said before, I think sometimes it's harder being a carer than it is the disabled person at times.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose for me, I mean, I won't say too much because I talked all the way through this bloody episode, as I do for all of them. But I think at the moment, I'm kind of trying to teach myself to find the frustrations of life, to just get on with it rather than vent it, if you know what I mean. It's kind of difficult to find yourself needing stuff doing, or wanting to do stuff that you could do, but just the way things have been set up, you can't do. And it's frustrating. So I think that's a big one. But to be honest, I think, you know, Anna's hit the nail on the head, that whole idea of boundaries and saying, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. You can do this, I'll do that. Makes it work if it's someone in your relationship. And I also think there needs to be much more support for people who are in that transition. Like, at some point, people like Zec and myself are going to get to a point where our partners are also needing care because they've got old. And we need to be helped again to say, right, how do you do this when you're both too old to be doing this for each other, or, you know, or just it's got too much. There's got to be a time when you can say, right, I can't do this anymore. Where do we go? And I think that's something that we don't know enough about.
Well, so Donna said she hopes I die before her because she needs a holiday.
Well, you know, that if she ever says let's go to Beachy Head, then I always think that's a sign. It's a sign. That's when
Have
you
a
go,
look.
look, it's all right, darling. You can just leave me. It's absolutely fine. There's no need to push me off the cliff.
Yeah,
and say,
Katie says.
freedom.
Katie says there must be some sort of boundaries between having your wife, being your wife, and then having your wife as a carer.
Yeah,
It merges, doesn't it? Though
Yeah.
it's love. When you're
And
in
I
love,
think
you care
also
for each other.
it's very easy for people on the outside to think that that they look after you, and like we've said earlier,
Yeah.
I look after Diane. Diane has terrible migraines, and when that happens, I am Nurse Mick, and that's
We
as simple as that.
understand why she might get migraines.
Yeah, no, I mean, imagine. This is what I'm like all the while. And you know the funny bit? Diane's worse. Diane took more than me. There you go.
I don't believe it.
Like. It's true. No, it really
We want
is.
proof. Get
Yeah, well,
Diane on.
Well, yeah. The key is be okay with it.
Yeah.
Embrace it and go and live the life you want to live. That's all I can say. Transitions is an overlooked topic. It is Georgia. Maybe we have to come on again, Georgia. And did Georgia come on once, or did she not?
She
come
did,
on?
yeah.
She did. You'll have to come on again, and we'll have to talk this from an expert point of view. We've had Anna's personal point of view. Anna, you must also come on again because you were fantastic.
Oh, anytime.
And I suppose we ought to wind it up there. So that was a show that tailed off very, very badly at the end, wasn't it?
And so it normally sticks to plan.
It does, yeah. It's just because people might want to go. I know that last time both Lucy and Alice just went, anyway, bye, and ran off. They were like, you run over, see ya. Anna, thank you so much for coming on. You've been absolutely fantastic. And let's have you on again to talk about proper disability politics. Like something I want to do soon is a proper disability politics one and talk about social models and all that kind of thing. So let's get the expert on again.
Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Zec, as ever, brilliant. And just point out, everybody, that sting at the start he made just before we went live because he'd forgotten to do it. And that's how good he is. That good. He's that good.
It's that bad that you forgot.
No. That's it's live television, man. It all goes wrong. And you were brilliant. So there you go. So with that, I'll stop talking and let our wonderful guests say goodbye. Bye.
I shall click end the broadcast, and believe me, people.
See you, folks. See you next time. 2 weeks. Don't forget something else. It'll be me talking most. I'm going to let Zec lead it next time just to shut me up.
Yeah. Bye, everyone. Shut up, man.
Bye.